There are moments in life when you can feel it clearly. Things are no longer the same as they used to be. For Pisces, this feeling does not arrive loudly. It comes in very quiet moments. A thought that keeps returning when night falls. A familiar emotion that suddenly feels heavier than before. A question about love that you can no longer avoid. You begin to realize not every change needs a dramatic sign. Some turning points happen in silence, but once they begin, there is no going back to who you were before. Love, life, and the way you see yourself are all standing at an important threshold. And this is not something to take lightly. If lately you have felt like you are standing in the middle of something serious, something real, something difficult to ignore, then the first signs have already started to appear. Pisces may not immediately notice the moment when things begin to change. There is no clear point to mark it, no major event forcing you to stop. It happens slowly, very slowly, as the emotions inside you begin to carry more weight. They no longer pass through lightly. Each thought arrives with depth, and once it touches you, it does not leave easily. You may still be living your familiar life, doing the same daily things, talking, smiling, keeping the same routines. But somewhere inside, there is a feeling that is hard to name, a feeling that what once felt like enough no longer does. Questions you once pushed aside now return on their own, without asking, without warning. Love starts appearing more often in your thoughts, not as fantasy, not as romantic expectation, but as quieter questions. Where am I in this relationship? Am I truly being seen? And more importantly, am I being honest with my own emotions? Pisces often senses life through intuition, but during this time, that intuition is no longer vague. It becomes clear in a very quiet way, like an underground current beneath the surface. It causes no disturbance, yet it is strong enough to change direction. You begin to realize the things you once overlooked were not unimportant. You simply were not ready to face them then. You may notice you are no longer lenient with your own feelings. Even small discomforts are no longer ignored, not because you have become more demanding, but because you have started listening to yourself more seriously. A look that lacks presence, a silence that lasts too long, a familiar voice that no longer carries the same warmth. All of it becomes clear to you now. This is often a sign of a transition, a place where you no longer fully belong to the past, but have not yet stepped into the future, a space in between where you no longer want to continue as before, but do not yet know which direction to take. And it is this suspended feeling that makes you reflect more deeply. Pisces may find yourself thinking more about values, about what a relationship should offer, about safety, about respect, about whether you are truly allowed to be yourself when you are with someone. These thoughts do not come to pressure you. They arrive as gentle reminders that perhaps you have gone far enough in one cycle to begin looking back. Not every change needs to be named right away. Some phases simply invite you to slow down, to observe more, to feel more, and to allow yourself to acknowledge what you once avoided. Pisces does not need to rush to conclusions, only to recognize that what you are feeling now is not appearing by chance. When a cycle is about to close, it rarely leaves with noise. It usually leaves subtle signs, a feeling of no longer wanting to compromise, a desire to live more truthfully, a need to love in a more mature way. And if you are sensing these things, perhaps this is no longer an ordinary phase, just a quiet moment before everything begins to move in a different direction. At a certain point, Pisces begins to realize you can no longer pretend the way you used to, not because you have grown weaker, but because you no longer want to deceive yourself. The things once held in silence start to find a voice, not loudly, not aggressively, but clear enough that you can no longer turn away. Love, at this stage, is no longer just an emotion. It becomes a mirror. Each time you look into it, you see more than you once wanted to see. An imbalance, perhaps. A distance that has become harder to ignore. Or simply the feeling that you are giving more than you are receiving. And what matters is this. You no longer feel the need to explain these things away. Pisces has always been good at understanding others. You sense people quickly. You make room for them easily. But during this time, that understanding begins to turn inward. You start asking different questions. Who is understanding me? Who is truly listening? And is the silence in this connection a sign of peace or a sign that no one is truly present anymore, some truths do not need words. They show themselves in how someone responds when you need them, in whether they stay or pull away when things become uncomfortable, in whether you are allowed to be yourself or whether you slowly shrink to keep the peace. These things may have been easy to overlook before, but now they stand clearly in front of you, not because love has suddenly become worse, but because your way of seeing has changed. You are no longer searching for what feels familiar. You are searching for what feels real. And when honesty appears, it often brings questions that are not easy to answer. But Pisces begins to understand something important. Not every question needs an immediate answer. Sometimes the courage to ask is already a meaningful step forward. At this stage, you may feel as though you are standing between two paths. One path leads back to what you know, holding on to what feels familiar, even if it no longer nourishes you. The other path leads toward clarity, even though it comes with uncertainty. And it is this tension that makes you reflect more deeply. Not because you are afraid of losing someone else, but because you are learning how not to lose yourself. In its own quiet way, love is inviting you to grow, not through dramatic lessons, but through very ordinary moments. The moment you no longer want to stay silent just to keep things smooth. The moment you no longer remain out of fear of being alone. The moment you begin asking about boundaries, about values, about what truly deserves your time, your energy, and your emotional presence. Pisces does not need to rush to decide what is right or wrong. This is not a story of judgment. It is a process of recognition, recognizing what nourishes you, recognizing what slowly drains you, and most importantly, recognizing whether you were loving from a place of freedom or from a place of over-sacrifice. The truth may not feel comfortable at first, but it carries something essential: relief. Relief from having to maintain a version of yourself just to fit the situation. Relief from pretending you are fine when you are not. A quieter relief that comes from living more honestly, even when the road ahead is still unclear. And when Pisces begins to look directly at the truth within love, it is often a sign that a deep inner shift is already underway. Not to break things apart, but to redefine them. Not to end everything immediately, but to step into the next chapter with greater awareness and deeper respect for yourself. Some decisions do not arrive as clear questions. They do not stand in front of you with two obvious options. They come as a lingering feeling, a feeling that quietly lets you know it is time to do something differently, even if you cannot yet name exactly what that is. For Pisces, this decision often looks like that, silent but unavoidable. You may never sit down and say, "I am about to make a major choice." There is no dramatic moment, no declaration, just small actions beginning to shift direction. You respond differently. You slow down where you once rushed. You stop replying immediately to things that once required explanation. And within those subtle changes, a new path quietly begins to form. Sometimes circumstances push you forward, a situation that forces you to face something, an event that no longer allows you to remain in between. But other times, you are the one who slowly walks toward that edge. Not because anyone asks you to, but because you no longer have the energy to maintain the old state. Either way, this moment carries a very different weight. Pisces feels deeply, but often moves gently. And this decision follows the same rhythm. It does not arrive through confrontation. It arrives through withdrawal from what no longer fits, through no longer wanting to explain, no longer wanting to convince, no longer wanting to hope that things will somehow change if you just wait a little longer. You may realize you are standing before a choice that does not need a label: to stay or to leave, to continue or to stop, to open your heart further or to protect a quiet space for yourself. What makes this choice different is not the outcome, but the place it comes from. You are no longer choosing from fear. You are choosing from a clearer state of awareness. Turning points rarely require absolute certainty. They ask for only one thing: honesty. Honesty with how you feel right now. Honesty with what you can no longer accept. Honesty with your desire to live in rhythm with yourself. When that honesty appears, the old path naturally loses its pull. Pisces may feel a touch of sadness, not because the decision is wrong, but because you understand you are closing a familiar chapter, a chapter you once held close, and yet another feeling rises alongside it. Relief. Relief from no longer having to break yourself into pieces to fit a structure that no longer suits you. This decision does not turn you into a different person overnight. It simply makes it impossible to continue being the old version. What once made compromise easy no longer carries the same power. What once kept you silent now meets a boundary. From that moment on, the way you love, the way you show up, the way you choose, begins to shift in a very natural way. Not every turning point makes noise. Some are quiet movements within. But it is those inner shifts that create the longest lasting change. Because when Pisces chooses from awareness, the road behind loses its hold. Not because it was bad, but because you have moved into a different frequency. And perhaps the most important part is not where you are going next. It is that you dared to step away from the old stopping point, dared to set down what no longer fits, and dared to trust that this quiet change is guiding you toward a more mature way of loving and living. Even as the path ahead reveals itself one step at a time, after a choice has quietly taken shape, even before it is spoken out loud, life often begins to shift its rhythm before the mind fully realizes it. For Pisces, this change does not arrive through major events. It comes through very ordinary moments. Daily routines slow down in certain places. Some conversations no longer stretch as long as they once did. A few old interests begin to fade on their own, without needing a clear reason. You may notice you no longer feel the urge to fill every empty space. Before, silence sometimes made you uneasy. Now, those quiet moments become where you find balance. Not because you are withdrawing from the world, but because you are learning how to stay with yourself without feeling empty. The way you see life also begins to change. Things that once felt essential no longer sit at the center. You are less focused on keeping everything intact. Instead, you pay closer attention to what is happening inside. Do I feel lighter? Do I feel safe within my own choices? And when the answer is unclear, you allow yourself to wait rather than forcing yourself to be okay right away. Pisces begins to recognize the value of simplicity, not living with less, but living with intention. You no longer want to spread your energy across connections that require constant effort. You become more aware of small moments that bring quiet peace, a morning without urgency, a conversation that does not require explanation, time alone that does not feel like absence. As love changes, the way you show up in life changes with it. You no longer place yourself in the role of always being there for others. You begin to consider whether staying or leaving honors your self-respect. This does not make you distant. Instead, it makes your warmth more intentional and more sincere. You may realize you are no longer pulled into familiar loops. Old patterns that once kept you circling gradually lose their hold. Not because they were wrong, but because you have outgrown the need for them. When faced with familiar situations, you pause a little longer, not to analyze, but to feel whether they still align with your current rhythm. Pisces often holds tightly to memory, but during this time, you learn not to let the past fully define the present. You honor what has been, without allowing it to keep you in place. There is a subtle shift in how you choose. You choose based on what nourishes you, rather than fear of change. Life begins to open into new spaces, not loud, not dramatic, just easier places to breathe. You may not yet name where you are heading, but you know you are no longer inside the old circle. And for Pisces, that alone is already a significant step. Inner peace slowly becomes a priority, not something to achieve, but something to protect. You begin to understand that familiarity does not always mean safety, and safety does not always come from staying. Sometimes it comes from stepping forward, even when the full path is not yet visible. This phase does not ask you to become someone else. It simply invites you to live more slowly, more honestly, and with greater kindness toward yourself. When you allow the rhythm of life to change, you also allow yourself to enter a new cycle, not to escape the past, but to live more fully in the present. And if you feel that your life is turning in a very different direction, even if it is not yet clear, perhaps this is not a loss. Perhaps it is simply a sign that you are ready to step out of the old loop and live a lighter, more mature version of yourself. There is a moment that is hard to name, when Pisces realizes you are no longer seeing life through the same eyes. Not because the world around you has changed too much, but because something inside you has shifted. You begin to see clearly what once existed only as a vague feeling. The haze lifts. The reasons you used to comfort yourself fade away. What remains is a clarity that arrives quietly and naturally. This awakening does not make noise. It does not push you to announce anything to the world. It simply makes you quieter, but that quiet now carries weight. You stop reacting out of habit. You pause before speaking. You observe before deciding. And within that slowing down, you begin to recognize where you truly stand. What makes this phase serious is not what you will do next. It is the fact that you no longer turn away from yourself. You see the limits you once overlooked. You understand that some connections exist only because of your silent self-sacrifice. And once you see that, you can no longer pretend it is not there. Pisces begins to feel your own worth with great clarity. Not through loud affirmations, but through the quiet refusal to diminish yourself, just to remain. You no longer try to prove your value. You no longer wait for recognition from places that have always kept you waiting. This awakening gently pulls you out of the familiar role of being the one who gives more than is ever asked. Love, during this time, is no longer measured by emotional intensity. It is felt through safety, through being able to be yourself without shrinking, through being heard without having to explain too much. And when a connection does not offer this, you begin to understand that no amount of strong emotion can replace the absence of respect. Boundaries are no longer foreign to Pisces. They do not appear as rigid walls, but as soft, clear lines. You understand that boundaries are not meant to push others away, but to keep yourself from disappearing. And when you begin to set them, you do not do so in anger, but with a deep sense of calm. This awakening also changes how you look back at your past choices. Not to blame, but to understand. You see how you once loved, what you once accepted, and what those experiences have taught you. There is no denial, no prolonged regret, only an acknowledgement that you have lived through enough to no longer repeat the same patterns. Pisces may feel more selective now, but in truth, you are simply more honest about your needs. You are not searching for perfection. You are searching for alignment. Alignment with your new rhythm. Alignment with how you want to love. Alignment with the version of yourself you are becoming. What makes this phase not something to take lightly is that you cannot return to not knowing. Once you see clearly, you cannot pretend you never understood. Once you touch real self-respect, you cannot remain in connections that cause you to question your own worth. Awakening does not make life easier overnight, but it makes life more honest. And sometimes, living honestly is the bravest thing of all. Pisces is learning how to love without abandoning yourself, learning how to stay with what is worthy, and learning how to let go of what no longer fits, not in pain, but in a very quiet understanding. When a cycle has fully come to an end, what follows is rarely urgency. What appears instead is a deep sense of calm. For Pisces, this new chapter does not open with applause or loud changes. It opens quietly, a quiet that carries maturity. As if you have finally set down a weight you have carried for too long, and for the first time, you notice how much lighter your shoulders feel. You no longer feel the need to chase anyone or anything to prove your worth. Not because you have closed your heart, but because you now understand that real value does not require self-sacrifice. You begin to love more slowly. You begin to live more selectively. And most importantly, you stop forcing yourself to fit into spaces that no longer align with who you are. At this stage, Pisces is not searching for perfection. You are searching for sincerity. Not grand promises, but consistent presence. Not fleeting intensity, but a sense of safety that allows you to be fully yourself. This new chapter does not make you distant. It simply makes you clearer about what you allow into your life. You may notice that the way you love is changing. You no longer love through quiet self-sacrifice. You no longer place someone else's emotions above your own without condition. You begin to understand that love and self-abandonment are not the same thing. And when love no longer asks you to lose yourself, it becomes much lighter to carry. Life itself also begins to move at a different pace, less rushing, less effort spent trying to hold on to what is already drifting away. You allow things to come and go with respect. Respect for others, and more importantly, respect for yourself. This does not make you weaker. It makes you steady in a very quiet way. This new chapter does not ask you to forget the past. It simply invites you to look back with gratitude. Everything you have lived through, both beautiful and difficult, has led you to this moment. You do not need to carry it all forward. Only the lessons that helped you understand yourself more, love yourself more, and live more honestly. Pisces now walks forward with a different kind of trust. Not the belief that everything will be perfect, but the confidence that you are capable of facing whatever comes. When you are no longer afraid of loss, life opens more space for you to breathe. And in that space, you meet a version of yourself you once did not allow to exist. This turning point does not close the door to love. It simply changes how you step inside. No more chasing, no more self-trade-offs. Just a gentle yet firm choice that you deserve connections that are full, respectful, and sincere. And if you are listening to this right now, perhaps you too are standing at the edge of a new chapter. There is no need to understand everything yet. No need to name it right away. Just allow yourself to keep moving forward with kindness toward yourself. Because sometimes, the most beautiful thing is not where you are going, but how you choose to walk from here. Pisces is rewriting a new chapter, not through fear, but through understanding, not through sacrifice, but through self-respect. And perhaps, this is how a truly mature life and a truly mature love quietly begins.